They told me not to come here. My sister said it would only hurt more. My best friend said I should just forget it ever happened. Even the counselor at the clinic suggested I focus on the future, not the past. But here I was, sitting across from the man whose name I hadn't even known 6 weeks ago in an office so cold and polished, it felt like a showroom for a life I'd never be part of. He didn't recognize me. I could see it the moment he stepped into the room, confident, controlled, too busy to offer more than a glance in my direction. His assistant had told me I had 10 minutes. That was generous, apparently. He didn't sit down. He just stood by the chair, arms crossed. "You asked for a private meeting," he said. His voice was sharper than I remembered, or maybe it just cut deeper now that I wasn't wrapped in sheets and moonlight. I nodded. "Yes. Just a moment of your time." He raised a brow, waiting. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. My hands shook a little. I hated that. I placed it gently on the table between us, careful not to look at him when I did. He opened it like it was a contract, then paused, pulled out the single image, a black and white ultrasound, grainy and blurred but unmistakable. I watched his face change. "What is this?" he asked, though the answer sat right there in his hands. "I'm 8 weeks along," I said. "The baby is yours." He stared at the photo, then at me, hard, as if trying to force the pieces together with sheer will. "I think you're mistaken," he said slowly. "I'm not." He placed the photo down. "I don't even know who you are." "You did," I said softly. "At least for one night." He scoffed. "I meet a lot of people at events. You'll have to be more specific." I opened the second envelope and slid out a small card, the one he'd left on the nightstand in the hotel room. His name embossed in gold. No phone number, just an address. It had taken me 2 weeks to work up the nerve to walk through those doors. "I didn't know your last name that night," I told him. "Didn't even know if your first name was real. But I'm sure." He folded his arms again. Defensive. I'd expected that. "Are you?" he asked. "Sure it's mine," I looked him in the eye. My voice didn't tremble when I said it. I was a virgin before that night. That made him pause. He blinked just once, but it was enough. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. "I'm not here to ask for anything," I continued. "Not money, not a relationship, not even your signature. I just thought, you should know." His jaw clenched. "Why?" "Because one day this child will ask me who their father is, and I want to be able to look them in the eye and say I told the truth." His gaze dropped back to the ultrasound. I don't know what he saw there. Maybe nothing. Maybe too much. I stood, picked up my bag, reached for the last thing I had brought with me, a rolled canvas in a cardboard tube. I placed it beside the ultrasound. "What's that?" he asked, still not looking at me. "A portrait," I said. "One I started the day after I left. I never finished it." "Why not?" "Because I didn't know what your face looked like in daylight." He finally looked at me then, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that might have been regret, or recognition, or just discomfort. It didn't matter. I turned and walked out before he could say another word. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the silence in with him. And I kept walking. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had already survived worse than a man forgetting my name. I didn't look back when I stepped out of his office. I could feel him watching, though. Not with curiosity, not with guilt, just confusion, as if I were a glitch in a system that always ran smoothly. The air in the hallway was colder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the absence of adrenaline. My legs felt steady, my breath calm. That surprised me. I hadn't cried. Not when he said he didn't remember me. Not when he asked if I was sure. Not even when he looked at that sonogram like it was someone else's problem, not his. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. Once, then again. The seconds stretched like hours. When the doors finally opened, I stepped in alone. I kept thinking he might follow me, might call out, "Wait." But of course he didn't. Men like Graham Callahan didn't chase ghosts from hotel rooms, especially not ones carrying truths they didn't want. Down on the ground floor, the receptionist gave me a polite, empty smile. I walked past her, past the marble lobby with its glass sculptures and curated flower arrangements, past the valet who didn't even glance up from his clipboard, out into the sharp, unfiltered daylight. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the city buzzing around me, wondering if I'd done something brave or something incredibly naive. Maybe both. Back upstairs, he was probably still staring at that tube. He hadn't unrolled the canvas. I could tell. He didn't touch it like he touched the sonogram, hesitantly, as if afraid it might bite. But that tube contained more of me than the ultrasound ever would. It wasn't just a sketch. It was the only thing I could hold on to in the weeks after that night, a fragment of something real I wasn't sure had even happened. I'd started it the next morning, still half-dressed, the bedsheets smelling faintly of his cologne, and something warm I didn't recognize in myself. The lines were soft at first, hesitant. I didn't try to capture his features. I tried to capture a feeling, something between stillness and fire, and then I couldn't finish it. Because how do you paint someone whose name you never knew, whose touch was both a beginning and an end? Still, I left it behind. Not as proof, but as punctuation. Maybe he'd open it. Maybe he'd toss it. Maybe it would roll under some filing cabinet and be forgotten, like I almost had been. Didn't matter. I'd said what I came to say, without trembling, without falling apart. That was enough. I turned the corner and walked toward the subway station. The nausea was back, not from pregnancy this time, but from the sheer emotional weight of it all. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't denied it outright. He hadn't threatened me or questioned my motives. He'd done worse. He'd remained calm, detached, in control. Men like him always were. And in some twisted way, I admired that. But control isn't the same as strength. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a tailored suit. I knew that look in his eyes before I left. The flicker behind the practiced calm. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was panic dressed as indifference. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had reached into the sealed vault of his life and dropped a truth he couldn't schedule or revise. A child. A night. A name he never cared to ask. And me. A woman he'd forgotten, standing unshaken in front of everything he tried to ignore. He wouldn't call. He wouldn't run after me. But he'd remember. That was enough. I reached the stairs to the train, placed my hand gently over my stomach, and whispered the first thing that came to mind. He knows now. That's all we needed. Then I took a breath and stepped into the next chapter. Alone, yes, but no longer silent. I didn't belong there. Not in that grand ballroom, not in heels that blistered after 10 minutes, not among men who dropped 7 figures like loose change. The invitation hadn't even been mine. It was meant for the principal of our school who came down with the flu. I'd volunteered to take her place, thinking it might help secure a grant for our art program. A desperate hope, not a strategy. I clutched my wine glass like a lifeline, the room too loud, too glossy. Laughter echoed off chandeliers. Every woman looked airbrushed. Every man looked like he owned a yacht, and the company that built it. I didn't see him at first. I was trying to escape the noise, slipping down a quiet hallway near the back of the venue. My feet ached. My brain ached more. I just needed 10 minutes of silence to remember who I was. That's when I saw him. He was standing by a painting, an abstract mess of red and silver that the hotel must have thought looked expensive enough to pass as art. His hands were in his pockets, shoulders tense like he'd just lost an argument, or maybe won one he didn't care about. I almost turned around, but he looked at the painting the same way I had, with contempt, not curiosity. "Let me guess," I said before I could stop myself. "It's called something like Passions Divide and sells for 40 grand. He looked at me startled. Then he smiled barely. "I think it's upside down," he said. I laughed. It slipped out too fast, too loud. I covered my mouth embarrassed. He tilted his head. "You don't sound like the others." "I'm not like the others," I said. "I teach high school." This dress cost more than my monthly grocery bill. That made him smile again. A real one this time. "And yet, here you are," he said. I shrugged. "For the kids. Hoping one of your kind funds a new kiln." He raised an eyebrow. "My kind rich. Detached. Slightly dangerous." He chuckled. "You forgot tired." There was something in his voice. Heavy. Like someone who hadn't slept in days but didn't dare admit it. I leaned against the wall beside him. For a moment neither of us spoke. "You," I asked softer now, "what brings you to passion's divide?" He exhaled slowly. "Board members, expectations, public image." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." We stood there for a while, two strangers hiding from a party neither of us wanted to attend. I noticed the way his eyes never stayed still, always scanning like he didn't trust stillness, like it scared him more than chaos. I understood that. I didn't ask his name. He didn't ask mine. It felt safer that way. Eventually, he offered me a drink. "One that doesn't cost more than your rent," he said. I followed him to the rooftop bar. The air was cooler up there. The city stretched around us, glittering and vast. We talked. About things that didn't matter, and then suddenly about things that did. I told him about my mom who worked 3 jobs and still missed rent. About the mural I was painting at the school, half done, always interrupted. About how some days I felt invisible even to myself. He listened. Then he told me about his father who taught him everything except how to stay. About a custody battle he was losing. About how success didn't taste like anything when you had no one to share it with. I didn't cry, but something inside me softened like thawing snow. That night I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. Not for what I did or what I lacked. Just seen. I didn't sleep with him to feel wanted. I slept with him because for the first time in a long time I felt real. And maybe I thought if we stayed strangers we could both pretend it meant nothing. But it meant something. Even if he forgot. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to have that one drink share, one laugh too long, and then go our separate ways, grateful for the sliver of realness in a night made of glass and pretense. But that's not what happened. We lingered. The first drink became a second. The rooftop emptied slowly, but we stayed. Not close, not flirtatious, just present. 2 people orbiting the same quiet. I remember thinking he looked different under the stars. Less like someone with an empire behind him. More like someone who had forgotten how to rest. When I made a joke about the cocktail tasting like perfume, he laughed, not a sharp business laugh, but something rounder, worn at the edges. The kind of laugh people let out when they forget to be careful. "I needed this," he said, his glass turning slowly in his fingers. "Needed what? To not be who I am. Just for a little while." I didn't answer. I knew exactly what that felt like. It wasn't late when we left the rooftop, but it felt like time had already broken into pieces. There was a beat of silence in the elevator, a moment of hesitation when we reached the lobby. I could have turned left. I didn't. He didn't ask. I didn't explain. We walked back to the hotel where he was staying, his steps quiet, mine deliberate. The night pressed close around us like it knew we were about to do something we'd never be able to name. In the hallway, he unlocked the door and I stood there. I could have said no. I could have asked for his name. But I didn't. I stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen. City lights spilled in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting long shadows across the floor. There was a stillness to it, like the room had been waiting for someone to disturb it. He poured another drink, but we didn't touch it. There was no urgency. No theatrics. He brushed my hair behind my ear slow, like he was memorizing the shape of a stranger. I didn't flinch. His kiss was soft, surprisingly so. Not a claim, not a demand, just an invitation. And I accepted. We undressed quietly, not out of shame, but something else. Reverence, maybe. He didn't ask if it was my first time, and I didn't tell him. I didn't want it to be a confession. I didn't want pity or ceremony. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted to feel something that didn't come with conditions or expectations. So I gave myself to that moment, to him, to the way his hands found the curve of my waist, like they'd been there before in some other life. To the way he paused, like checking to make sure I was still with him. I was. When it was over, we lay in silence side by side but not touching. He stared at the ceiling. I stared at him. He looked so human then. Not polished or powerful, just tired and bare. I should go, I whispered. He didn't stop me, just reached for the bedside table and slid over a business card. No phone number, no email, just a name. Graham Callahan. I took it without reading. In the bathroom, I dressed slowly. My body felt different. Not broken, not changed. Just awake. I looked at myself in the mirror. There was a blush across my chest. My lips were still slightly parted. I looked like someone I didn't know. Someone braver. When I stepped out, he was already drifting off, one arm across the empty side of the bed. He didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. I slipped the card into my purse, tucked the memory somewhere deep and unreachable, and walked into the early morning where the streetlights hummed like a lullaby for the city's secrets. I told myself it was just one night. But some nights never end. Not really. A black car pulled up in front of my building at exactly 9 a.m. No text, no call. Just a name card held up by a driver in a suit too crisp for my street. I hesitated before getting in, not because I was scared, but because it felt like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. The ride was quiet. No music. Just the low hum of tires on pavement and the occasional glance from the rearview mirror. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. We drove through parts of the city I rarely saw. The streets widened. The trees got taller. The houses sat behind iron gates like secrets. His place wasn't what I expected. No gleaming glass towers or ultra-modern coldness. Instead, a brick colonial perched on the edge of a wooded hill, all clean lines and quiet confidence. Timeless. Like him. The driver opened the door, but no one came to greet me. I let myself in. Inside, it was immaculate. Sparse, but tasteful. Everything in muted grays and soft light, like someone had designed a home for someone who never planned to live in it. He was already waiting, standing by the fireplace, dressed in slate and silence. "Thank you for coming," he said. I didn't answer, just took in the room, the polished wood floors, the single chair beside the hearth, the absence of warmth, despite the sunlight spilling through tall windows. He gestured to the couch. I sat, straight-backed, still. He handed me a folder. I opened it slowly. The pages inside were thick, expensive. His scent clung faintly to the edges, clean, clinical. It was a contract. 12 weeks of cohabitation, private medical care, security discretion, a public story if needed. No press, no exposure, no expectations of intimacy. In exchange, I was to stay under his roof until the pregnancy reached a stable milestone. I kept my face still as I read. I'd expected something like this. He was a man who ran empires. Of course he'd approach parenthood like a merger, but it still stung seeing my life, my body reduced to clauses and contingencies. He didn't interrupt me, just waited like this was a pitch, and I was a client with options. When I got to the clause about termination, what would happen if I chose not to continue the pregnancy, I paused. "I'm not ending this," I said flatly. "I never assumed you would," he replied. There was no emotion in his voice, just fact. When I finished, I placed the folder on the table between us. It's thorough, I said. I like clarity, he replied. So do I. He raised an eyebrow. I could tell he was waiting for the ask for me to bargain, to negotiate, to slip in a demand. But I didn't. Instead, I sat back, crossed my legs, and said, Before I sign anything, I have my own conditions. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, like a breeze passing between two cliffs. I'm listening, he said. No surveillance in my room. No control over my schedule. I keep teaching my students remotely. And no touching, not without consent. Ever. His jaw tightened. Not in disagreement, just surprise. I wasn't here to play house. I was here because prenatal vitamins cost more than I could afford, and I didn't want my child starting life with a deficit I'd spent years trying to climb out of. He nodded. Agreed. I reached for the pen he'd left beside the folder. Before I signed, I looked up at him. Just so we're clear, I said, this isn't me accepting help. This is me making space for a future neither of us planned. He looked at me, then really looked. Not like a man evaluating a problem, but like someone realizing the ground under him had shifted. Understood, he said quietly. I signed. And just like that, two people who barely knew each other entered into a silent, elegant arrangement that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with surviving the storm we'd made together. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like it knew this wasn't just ink and paper, like it understood that this moment, this decision would echo for the rest of my life. I stared at the line where my name was supposed to go, and for a second, I didn't move. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of it too. I need one more thing, I said quietly. Graham didn't flinch. He'd probably been expecting a final twist, money, leverage, some hidden agenda. He adjusted his stance, arms crossed, the faintest hint of guarded calculation in his eyes. I met his gaze, steady. Have you thought about how this child will feel one day? I asked. He blinked, surprised by the question. When they grow up, I continued, and realized they were the result of a one-night stand, of two people who couldn't even look each other in the eye afterward. When they asked me why I stayed here with a man who drew up a contract before he asked if I was okay, he said nothing. I wasn't done. What do I tell them, Graham? That you did your duty, that you gave them medical care and safety and kept them out of the press. Do I tell them you paid for peace and called it parenting? His face was unreadable, but something in his jaw shifted. A flicker of discomfort, maybe? Or memory. I softened my tone just a little. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. I'm not asking you to pretend this is something it's not. But if we're going to share this space, if you're going to be part of this child's story, I need you to consider more than just headlines and bloodlines. A long pause, then quietly, what are you asking for? No cameras, I said. No PR statements, no curated images of the doting father. If you want to be involved, be present, not performative. If not, then say it now and I'll leave. It hung in the air like a dare. He looked at me, not through me. And for the first time I saw something behind the steel, a flicker of shame, or maybe recognition. You think I haven't thought about that? He asked. The child, I didn't answer. He exhaled, walked to the window. The city was gold, outside, sunlight hitting stone. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. I had a son once, he said. Still do, technically. I lost custody 3 years ago. I haven't seen him in almost 6 months. That knocked the breath out of me. I hadn't expected that. Graham turned slower now. I built walls to keep the world out. I thought I was protecting what mattered. Turns out I just locked myself in. I stayed silent. He came back to the table, sat across from me, not looming, not towering. Just there. Flesh and fatigue and something raw beneath the polish. I won't pretend I know how to be what this child needs, he said. But I hear you. And if you'll let me, I'll try. I nodded once. Not because I believed him completely, but because that was the first thing he'd said all morning that didn't sound like a business pitch. I picked up the pen again. Signed. And in that moment, we weren't adversaries or strangers tied by accident. We were two fractured people standing on the same fragile bridge, trying maybe to build something that could hold more than silence. We lived like shadows in that house. Parallel lines close but never touching. He stayed on the east side, I stayed on the west. His room, his study, his meticulously organized kitchen. Mine was a guest suite with soft towels and a closet full of clothes I hadn't picked. It all looked like a catalog, smelled faintly of cedar and control. We barely spoke. Not because of anger, just distance. The kind of silence that comes when neither person knows how to begin. We ate separately. He preferred the kitchen island. I took my meals on the sun porch where light filtered through old glass and the plants never asked questions. Still, he was always present, quiet, but never absent. He didn't knock on my door or ask about the baby, but when my morning sickness started, I noticed ginger tea packets appearing in the cabinet. When I ran out of my prenatal vitamins, a new bottle showed up on the counter the next day. Same brand, double supply. One morning, I found a lemon sliced neatly on a plate next to a glass of warm water. He never said it was from him. I never asked. At our first ultrasound appointment together, we sat in the waiting room like strangers on a train. He wore a gray suit. I wore jeans and a hoodie that didn't quite cover the nervous twist in my stomach. When my name was called, I stood slowly expecting to walk alone. But he rose too. Didn't say a word. Just walked beside me into the room. The nurse glanced between us, trying to place the dynamic. Neither of us offered clarification. He stood by the window while the machine warmed up. I lay back, eyes on the ceiling tiles, unsure what I wanted more, to cry or to feel nothing at all. Then the sound came. The heartbeat. Fast. Strong. Real. I didn't look at him, but I heard him exhale. Not sharply. Not with shock. Just a slow, almost reverent breath. On the way home, he drove. The silence between us felt different this time, not avoidance, but a fragile truce. Back at the house, I found a small footstool by the chair in the living room. Just the right height to keep my back from aching when I read. No note, just placement. Subtle, intentional. I was used to men who spoke too much and meant too little. Graham was the opposite. He said nothing, but things appeared, shifted, adjusted around me like invisible hands trying to build a bridge without words. One afternoon, I returned from a short walk to find the pantry reorganized. All the sharp items moved to higher shelves, the heavy boxes replaced with lighter ones. He'd done it while I was out. Later, I walked into the study to find a sketch pad on the desk, the same brand I used in college. Next to it sat a set of graphite pencils untouched. A small card underneath read in his handwriting, "For when the words won't come." I didn't thank him. Not yet. But that night, I opened the pad and drew the first line in weeks. It wasn't a masterpiece, just a simple outline. A pair of hands, one open, one hesitant. And in the center, a lemon slice. The next morning, the sketch pad was still there. The pencil hadn't moved, but I had. Maybe just a little. The first line was hesitant. Not because I didn't know where to start, but because I finally cared too much. My hands hovered over the page like they were asking permission from someone who wasn't even in the room. I started with the shoulders, not too broad, just enough weight to show the burden he carried without ever letting it drop. Then the curve of the neck. The slight angle of someone who rarely let his guard down even when no one was watching. The face was the hardest. Not because I couldn't remember it, but because I remembered it too well. The way his eyes never settled in one place, the line between his brows that deepened when he thought too long, the kind of mouth that only knew how to soften when no one was looking. This wasn't the first time I'd tried to draw him. The first sketch, the one I'd left in his office, was born out of confusion. I'd drawn from memory that was more emotion than image. This one was different. This one was from observation, because now I saw the details. The way he paused before entering a room. The way he set his coffee down exactly 3 inches from the edge of the counter. The way he never wore socks indoors, as if grounding himself to the floors made him less likely to float away. I didn't know if this version of him would ever see the drawing, but it felt like something I needed to finish for myself. The second night I worked on it, I stayed up later than usual. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic click of the grandfather clock down the hall. My pencil scratched lightly across the page, chasing shadows building shape. I didn't hear him approach, only noticed when I felt the shift in air behind me. He didn't speak, just stood there watching. I kept drawing. It was the first time he'd seen me in my element. No armor, no contract, no guarded stares. Just me, surrounded by shavings of graphite and the soft glow of a desk lamp. I expected him to ask what I was drawing. He didn't. Instead, the next morning, I found a new set of pencils on the desk. Not cheap ones, either, the kind real artists dream of but rarely buy. There was no note, only a small piece of lemon candy beside them. It made me smile. That night, I couldn't sleep. The baby had been kicking all day, restless, like me. I walked to the kitchen for water and found the living room light still on. Graham was sitting on the couch barefoot, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No," I said. "The baby's staging a protest." He nodded like he understood. I was about to turn back when he spoke again. "I had a son," he said almost too softly. I turned. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the glass in his hand, like it held the past in its amber folds. "He's 9 now. Lives with his mother in Oregon." I sat down on the armchair opposite him, waiting. "I lost the custody hearing," he continued. "Not because I was a bad father, but because I wasn't enough of one." That surprised me. I was always working, always building something. Told myself it was for him, for his future. But I missed too many school plays, too many bedtime stories. Eventually, I became a stranger with a checkbook. He finally looked up. "There's no clause for that in the contracts I write." Silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry," I said. He shook his head. "Don't be. I told you because I don't want to be that man again. With this child." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. That night, I finished the drawing, and for the first time, I didn't leave the page blank where his eyes should have been. It started with a search for paper. That's all I was looking for, just a few blank sheets to test out the new graphite set he'd left me. I didn't want to keep using the sketch pad he'd bought. It felt too clean, too intentional. I needed rougher pages, something less curated. I thought the bottom drawer in his study might have some. He was always printing things, flipping through reports, highlighting contracts I never asked about. It didn't feel like trespassing. Not then. But the drawer wasn't full of printer paper. It was full of names. One name, really. Mine. Except not me, my father. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. There were articles, old yellowed, printed from archived sources. News stories from nearly 2 decades ago. Some clipped, others marked up with red ink. A few were in plastic sleeves, preserved like artifacts from a war long over, but never forgotten. I picked one up. Local CFO accused of multi-million-dollar embezzlement in Reed Holdings collapse. There was a photo beside the headline. Miguel Brooks. I hadn't seen that face in years. Not since the day he left and never came back. My mother had always called it complicated. I called it abandonment. He disappeared before I hit puberty, and with him went the mortgage, the savings, the quiet hum of stability. I stared at the article, and then the next, and the next. All of them told the same story, fraud, theft, insider deals, and buried in the details the victims, Reed Holdings, a legacy company family-owned, brought down overnight. One quote was underlined in pen: "The collapse wiped out entire departments. The CEO's family was left with nothing." I felt something twist in my chest. I knew that name. Reed Holdings was the foundation Graham had rebuilt his empire on, or what remained of it. He'd used the pieces of a ruined legacy to build something new, something sharper, harder, untouchable. And my father had been the one to bring it down. I sat on the floor, folders spread out like shattered glass around me. My name, his name, and between them a decade of silence neither of us had dared to speak into. Graham had known. He must have seen it the moment I filled out the medical intake form. Riley Brooks. It was right there. He didn't need to search. He just needed to remember. And he had. But he hadn't said a word. He'd signed the contract. Let me into his house. Let me carry his child. Let me believe this was a beginning, when maybe all along I was just a full circle. I closed the drawer slowly, careful not to make a sound. The papers were back in place. The secrets too. I walked out of the study like nothing had happened. Nodded to the maid as I passed. Smiled at the nurse checking her tablet in the hallway. All while my hands felt like ice and my skin burned with something I couldn't name. That night I couldn't sleep. The baby kicked once, then again. Restless, like it could feel what I felt. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal sinking in, not just because of what my father had done, but because Graham had known, and still looked me in the eye every morning like I wasn't a wound reopened. That was the part that broke me. He knew, and he stayed silent. I waited until the house had gone still. Not quiet, his house was always quiet, but still like it was holding its breath. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, swirling something in a glass he hadn't tasted. The overhead light made him look softer than usual. Or maybe I was just seeing him through the haze of disappointment. He didn't hear me enter. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He turned, slowly, but not surprised, so he knew this moment was coming. I found the drawer. I added the articles, the records, everything about my father. He didn't speak. Not right away. Just looked at me. Not guarded this time, just tired. "How long have you known?" I pressed. "Since the clinic," he said simply. "When I saw your full name." That hit harder than I expected. "From the very beginning," I said. "And you said nothing." There was nothing to say. I blinked. Nothing. He set the glass down with quiet precision. "What did you want me to do, Riley?" He asked, his voice even. "Throw you out. Tell you your presence offended me. Accuse you of sins that weren't yours?" "You could have told me the truth," I said. "You owed me that." He leaned against the counter, hands in his pockets. "I didn't know how. You didn't know how. Or you didn't want to risk ruining the narrative you were building." He didn't answer. "Did you invite me here to watch me crack?" I continued. "Was it penance, revenge? Some quiet, controlled punishment for what my father did to your family?" "No." "Then what was it?" He was silent for too long, and that silence answered me. "You suspected me?" I whispered. "From the start." He looked up. His eyes didn't deny it. I felt something collapse inside me. "You thought I came here with an angle," I said. "You thought I knew. That I used you." He opened his mouth, maybe to defend, maybe to explain. But I raised a hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't try to rewrite it now." I stepped back. "You let me stay in your house, sleep under your roof, carry your child, while believing I might be the daughter of the man who ruined your life, and maybe just like him." He said my name softly, but I didn't want softness. I wanted honesty. I wanted what we never really had. I turned, walked past the hallway that had once felt like a truce, and now felt like a tunnel with no way out. I entered his study, and took the sketch off the desk. It wasn't finished. It never would be. I rolled it up carefully. No anger, just quiet. That quiet that comes when a dream exhales for the last time. He didn't follow me. Not to the door. Not to the car. Not to the sidewalk where the night air felt sharper than it should have. As I waited for the rideshare to arrive, I placed a hand on my belly, steadying myself. "I'm not running," I whispered to the child inside me. "I'm walking away because we deserve better than silence and suspicion." The car pulled up. I got in. Didn't look back. Because if I had, I might have stayed. Springfield was quieter than I remembered. Or maybe I was just learning how to listen again. My aunt's guest room smelled like lavender and wood polish. The mattress was too firm, the window stuck halfway when I opened it. But it was safe. Still. Far enough from everything I'd left behind. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tea, told me where the extra towels were, and left a small teddy bear on the dresser without a word. It still had the tag on it. I didn't unpack fully. I never meant to stay long. Days passed. I taught remote classes in the mornings, napped in the afternoons. My body ached in new places. The baby was growing, stretching, claiming space I hadn't realized I'd been holding too tightly. And then, on the 5th day, a letter arrived. No return address. No typed name. Just my name written in block letters, thick ink, sharp edges. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Graham's handwriting. "I won't apologize. Not yet. Maybe not ever, not until I understand what apology means outside of obligation, but I wanted you to know what I've been doing." That was the first line. The rest wasn't poetic. It wasn't even particularly elegant. He wrote like someone who'd never used a pen outside of signing contracts. He told me he'd cleared out the room we once called the guest suite, that he'd replaced the harsh lights with softer bulbs, added curtains, lowered the bed, removed the glass furniture. He said he didn't know what a nursery was supposed to feel like, but he was trying. He was reading books about infants, articles about postpartum care. He'd bookmarked a video titled "What Fathers Get Wrong in the First Month." He admitted it made him nervous. Not the baby. The stillness. He didn't know how to be present without performing. And then taped to the bottom of the page was a scanned copy of the drawing I'd left behind, my unfinished sketch of him. But something was different. Across the page, lightly, almost hesitantly, he had added a pencil line. One line. Faint but deliberate. Across the center of the chest. It wasn't good. The proportions were off. The pressure was uneven. The angle didn't match. But he'd tried. He had touched something I thought he'd always keep untouched. At the bottom of the letter he'd written, "This isn't to win you back. It's just me learning how to be still in a room someone else once filled with color." No signature, no closing, just white space. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it inside the baby book I hadn't dared write in yet. Later that evening, I sat outside on the porch, the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting golden veins across the deck. My aunt joined me, said nothing, just handed me another envelope, thicker this time. Inside were more pages, updates, not apologies. He told me he'd assembled a crib. Wrong the first time, better the second. He said he was trying new recipes, most of which were disasters. That he now kept lemon candies in his pockets, in case I ever came back and needed one. I didn't know what to call these letters. They weren't love letters. They weren't pleas. They were witnesses. Proof that he was still there, doing the work I'd demanded, not for me, not even for the baby, but because something in him had shifted. He was learning how to show up. And maybe that mattered more than any sorry ever could. The next letter came with no warning. No seal. Just a manila envelope, slightly crumpled, smelling faintly of charcoal and lemon oil. Inside was the sketch. The original one. Not a scan this time. He must have gone to the townhouse and found the one I left rolled in its tube. The graphite had smudged slightly at the corners, but the center remained intact. His face, half-finished eyes, detailed lips only hinted at. The kind of portrait that stopped mid-breath. But now someone had dared to continue it. Shaky lines extended from the collarbone down. A crude outline of his jacket. His hand attempted in broken strokes. The fingers were awkwardly bent, the shading uneven. My precise contours were overlaid with blunt pencil marks that barely followed the original form, and in the lower right corner a single note in handwriting I now recognized immediately. I had to use my left hand. The right wouldn't stop shaking. I pressed the paper flat on the dining table. My aunt stood behind me, silent, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I didn't cry right away. At first I laughed. Not out of joy, out of shock. He'd ruined it. My sketch. The one I poured hours into. Every mark deliberate. Every shadow a choice. And he'd gone over it like a child doodling on a masterpiece. But then I looked again. And I saw it. Not the mistake. The trying. There was something unguarded about his version of himself. My lines had been clean, distant, professional. His were raw. Human. As if he was finally admitting he didn't know how to be anyone but broken. I saw where the pencil slipped. Where it pressed too hard. Where he must have erased and tried again. I imagined him hunched over the page, elbow tucked awkwardly in, lips pressed thin with concentration, no assistant around to fix it. No AI or digital brush to save the symmetry. Just him. And the page. And a second chance he didn't know how to take with words. That's when I cried. Not for the drawing. Not for what we'd lost. But for what he was offering clumsily, quietly. Not perfection. Not redemption. Just effort. I traced the edge of one of the newer lines, my fingertip catching on the grain of the paper where it had been dented by pressure. He didn't know how to draw, but he tried. God, he tried. And somehow in that trying, I no longer saw him as the man who left me in that office with nothing but silence. He wasn't the billionaire anymore, not the one-night mistake, not even the father who didn't ask. He was just Graham, a man who ruined a drawing because he didn't know how else to tell me he was still here. That evening, I sat by the window, the light falling soft and golden through the curtains. I laid the portrait flat beside me and opened a blank page in my sketchbook. Not to redraw him, but to draw us. 2 outlines unfinished. 1 pencil stroke at a time. I didn't plan to return. Not that day. Not to that house. Not to him. But something in the air shifted. Maybe it was the way the wind blew in Springfield that morning, warmer than it should have been in October. Or the way the envelope with the second sketch sat too long on my dresser, demanding to be answered. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to hear his voice. I just showed up again like a ghost, testing the limits of her own story. When I reached the house, the gates opened without a word. He must have left my name with security. Or maybe he never took it off. The house looked the same, too quiet for its size. The kind of quiet you only noticed when your own heart was too loud. No one greeted me, no staff, no butler. Just the sound of my heels crossing hardwood and the faint scent of lemon oil. The same one from the envelope. I didn't mean to go to the nursery. I thought I'd just glance into the kitchen, maybe the library, then leave. But my feet pulled me down the west hallway to the one room I had never stepped inside. The door was cracked open, and the light. It spilled out in soft gold like the room had been soaking in warmth all morning just to offer it back. Inside there wasn't much yet. A rocking chair, a chest of drawers, some folded onesies stacked neatly on a shelf. On the far wall, a single crib, empty, polished, waiting. And above it, framed in pale oak, my sketch. The original, not the one he defaced. The first. He'd taken it, flattened it, preserved it. The smudges were still there, and he hadn't tried to correct them. The crease from the tube still faintly lined the bottom edge, but he'd framed it anyway. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt him. Graham stood at the doorway, still in a suit, no tie sleeves rolled to his elbows. There was something tired in his posture, but not defeated. He carried a small stuffed bear in one hand, the kind you pick up because you don't know what else to bring into a child's life. We didn't speak. Not right away. I turned to him slowly, unsure what I expected to find. Regret, relief. But his eyes didn't ask for anything. They only offered quiet acknowledgement. I was here. He knew it cost me something, so he gave nothing back but space. The silence between us wasn't cold. It wasn't the brittle silence from the office that day. This one felt waiting, willing, a little cracked but gentle. I didn't know where else to put it, he said, finally nodding toward the drawing. It felt like it belonged here. I nodded. It does. And it did. Not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. I crossed to the crib and ran my fingers along the frame, then looked up again at the drawing. My own hands had made that once, but now it felt like it had a life of its own. A beginning. A question mark. A dare. Graham moved beside me, setting the bear gently in the crib. I didn't fix the mistakes, he said. I looked at him. No. I thought. Maybe they weren't mistakes. I stared at him then. Not the powerful CEO. Not the man who once turned his back. Just a father. Trying. Failing. Trying again. I didn't say I forgive you. I wasn't sure I had. I didn't say I'm back. Because I wasn't. Not yet. But I stayed in that room for a long while. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't talk about custody or co-parenting or lawyers or trust. We talked about names, not contracts, not debts. Names. Because sometimes the only way forward is to start from what you name something. And in that golden light, with silence between us and a framed imperfection above, we quietly agreed. Not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be framed exactly as they are. I didn't expect to cry that day. I thought I'd cry when I first saw him again, or when I stepped into the nursery, or when I found the framed sketch. But I didn't. Not until I reached for his hand. It happened without thinking, without planning the words in my head like I used to do, rehearsing conversations I'd never have. We were standing side by side in the room filled with golden light. The stuffed bear still rested in the crib like a placeholder for something real. And Graham was quiet beside me, his eyes studying the drawing like it still held answers he hadn't earned. I turned to him, and for the first time in months, I let my guard fall. Graham, I said softly. He looked at me. Really looked. Not the way people do in business meetings, calculating, assessing, but the way someone watches a sunrise not because they control it, but because they don't. I took his hand. It was warm, still rough from calluses I didn't remember being there before. I guided it slowly, steadily down to my belly. He didn't resist. He didn't flinch. And when his palm rested there over the quiet flutter of something not yet born, but already becoming, I saw it. His breath caught, his eyes filled, his world narrowed. This, I whispered, isn't just mine. He looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't. So I kept going. Whatever happened between us, however messy, however painful, it gave me this. I pressed his hand a little closer. This heartbeat. This beginning. He swallowed. I wasn't sure if you'd let me. I'm not letting you anything, I said, gently shaking my head. I'm asking. He froze. I didn't pull away. I'm asking, I repeated, because I need you to understand that this child deserves more than contracts and silence and walls. He blinked. You said you didn't want. I didn't want surveillance. I didn't want control. I didn't want to be another name in your files. I took a breath. But I do want a father for this child who doesn't just sign things or send people or hide in another room. I hesitated, then added, and maybe I want someone who can sit beside me when I'm scared, who doesn't know everything, who tries anyway. He said nothing for a long time. Then slowly he looked down at his hand on my belly. And when he looked back at me, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Not power, not pride, permission. Riley? He said, his voice lower than I remembered, like gravel and apology, and hope all folded into one. I don't know if I can be what you need. My heart trembled, but he added, if you let me stay, I'll learn. My lips parted. He didn't promise perfection. He didn't vow to make everything right. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. But he stayed. In that room, in that moment, with his hand still on my belly and the sunlight still painting us gold, he made the one choice that mattered more than any other. He didn't walk away. Not this time. And that, more than any contract, more than any portrait, was the beginning of something real. There's a particular kind of silence that lives in the early days of parenthood. It's not the absence of sound, but the absence of certainty. Every coo, every cry, every breath that seems too shallow, it makes your heart stop for a second. You listen closer, not knowing if you should panic or exhale. That's the silence we lived in, and it was beautiful. Graham had never held a newborn before. That much was obvious when he tried. The first diaper change was a disaster. He opened the wrong side, used the wrong wipes, put the tabs inside out. But he didn't flinch at the mess. He didn't hand her off like a hot potato. He just frowned, wiped sweat off his forehead, and muttered, "We'll figure this out, huh?" to a blinking, unimpressed infant. He spent 3 hours trying to assemble the crib backwards. When Riley walked in, the side rails were upside down and the mattress was leaning like a miniature slide. She didn't scold. She laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh, it was the kind you let out when something breaks open inside you. A release. The sound of something long locked away finding its way to the surface. He looked up, flushed red. "I swear the instructions were in Greek. They were in English." She grinned, walking over. He stepped back, hands up. "You fix it. I'm going to go draw." That was new. He hadn't picked up a pencil in weeks. Not since the letter. Not since she came back. But now he did, even if the drawings were clumsy. He sat on the studio floor with her, sometimes beside Riley, sometimes with the baby strapped to his chest in a too-tight sling, and used wax crayons to sketch little shapes. A baby rattle her tiny sock, the curl of her hair on a pillow. Riley teased him once. "You're better with charcoal." "I'm better with stock acquisitions." He muttered, tongue sticking slightly out as he shaded in the lopsided teddy bear. That night he asked if he could try feeding her. She was barely taking the bottle, mostly for comfort, but he held her with all the grace of a man holding the future in his hands. She fell asleep on his chest. And for the first time since Riley walked into his office with a rolled-up canvas and a secret too big for one heart, Graham smiled openly without defense. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Riley was folding baby clothes on the other side of the room. She looked over. "That's not how this works." He blinked. "You don't earn a child," she said, softer now. "You show up. You stay. You try. Every day. Even when you fail." She walked over, touched the baby's foot, then his shoulder. "And you're here. That's what matters." He didn't respond. But when she stepped away, he looked down at the infant sleeping on his chest and whispered, "Hi, Peanut. I'm your dad. Not father. Not provider. Just dad." 3 syllables, 1,000 miles traveled. The next morning, they hung her first drawing in the hallway, a scribble Riley helped her do by guiding her tiny fist over paper. It looked like chaos, but they framed it anyway. Later that day, sunlight poured into the nursery. Graham stood beside the crib he finally fixed. Riley leaned in the doorway, arms folded, watching him adjust the mobile. It was crooked, but she didn't correct it. Instead, she said, "She's lucky, you know." He turned. "Why to have a father who doesn't run?" He looked at her for a long moment. "So am I." She tilted her head. "Lucky," he clarified, "to have a second chance. With both of you." And for the first time, they didn't feel like two people forced into something strange. They felt like something new, something clumsy and unbalanced, and deeply, irreversibly real. We never finished the first portrait. It still hangs in the hallway right above the light switch between the nursery and the studio. People pause when they see it. Some tilt their heads trying to figure out what's missing. It's obvious to me. I never completed his left eye. The hand holding the pencil is just an outline. The shadows on his cheek stop mid-stroke. I could finish it now. I have better brushes, steadier hands. I know his face in ways I didn't back then, but I won't. One morning, I walked past it and saw a faint smudge in the corner chalk maybe, or just the imprint of a curious little hand. I reached up with a marker and added a small line of text just below the frame. "Some things are beautiful because they're unfinished." Graham saw it later that day. He didn't say a word. Just stood in front of the painting for a long time, then reached out and touched the edge of the canvas like it might vanish. Then he walked into the nursery and picked up our daughter. And I knew he understood. This love we have, it doesn't look like the book said it would. There were no grand declarations, no weddings, no promises carved in stone. There were just a broken crib, a bottle of prenatal vitamins he never forgot to restock, a silent car ride to the hospital at 3 a.m., his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The way he whispered, "You've got this," when I screamed through labor. The way he cried when she cried. The way he stayed. Some days he still flinches when I talk about my father. He still hates the name. Still thinks he should have told me sooner. I still haven't forgiven that silence. Not completely, but I've learned something. Forgiveness isn't a door that swings open once. It's a hallway you walk down together, step by step. Sometimes in silence, sometimes barefoot and bleeding, but you keep walking. The studio is always messy now. Crayon scribbles, baby toys, scraps of canvas, and empty mugs. It used to bother him. Now he smiles when he trips over a toy. The man who once held a contract between us like a shield now holds his daughter like she's the most fragile miracle in the world. And maybe that's what he is too. Not a villain. Not a hero. Just a man who tried again. Some days I still get scared. Of what we were. Of what we might never be. But then he brings me my favorite tea without asking. Or puts on the lullaby playlist even when she's already asleep. Or kisses the back of my hand like it's instinct. And I realize we're not finished. We never will be. And maybe that's the point. I once believed love had to be complete to be worth keeping. But now I think the things we leave unfinished are the ones that stay with us the longest.